Welcome to the Jeremy and Andy Talk Movies podcast. I'm Jeremy.
I'm Andy.
And today we're doing our second episode of the day.
We do change our clothes.
Yeah.
We should be.
I mean, do I wear mostly very similar things? Yes. But actually I do mostly
but
watch
we're just
them.
doing back-to-back recordings today.
And for this episode, we're going to be talking about the new horror movie, The Woman in the Yard.
Yeah.
Andy, this is exactly the type of movie that before our podcast
You would have never gone to see.
I would not have seen.
Yeah.
But because of our podcast, honestly, even this one though, because it seemed a little more from the previews like a straight horror movie, I still was kind of like, I don't know. You know, like we've talked about before, I tend to find horror comedy or maybe like something a little.
You're not
there's got to be
much of
some
just
sort of like creative, something different in
Yeah.
it. And this just looked like, oh, this one's just going to try to scare me.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know if I'm into that. But you said you're going to see it. And I said, you know what? I've been trying more horror movies. I've been enjoying them. I'm going to go see Woman in the Yard.
And it only costs you an hour and 25 minutes of your life. This is a really short movie.
You know what? I meant to look up how long the
It was
movie
an
was.
hour and 25 minutes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Summary of this one is very simple. You get the premise from the preview.
Pretty self-explanatory, isn't it?
It's a family living on sort of a remote farmhouse. It's a mother with her son and daughter. I guess we can't add, you don't know from the previews, but that the dad has been recently killed in an accident. And this woman shows up in the yard, cloaked in black.
Yeah.
Very mysterious character. And from the get-go, it just seems off-putting and strange and menacing.
Yep.
And then the movie just progresses. This woman doesn't leave, and she inches closer to the house. And then the family dynamics start to come into play as they're stressed out about what to do about this lady in the yard. And then eventually turns full horror movie.
Yeah.
That's
a very
enough
fair
of the summary.
description, yeah.
So, Andy, was Woman in the Yard good?
Okay.
Ooh.
You know, we compare sometimes like movies to food.
Yes.
Follow along with me.
Okay.
I'm going to now compare this movie to a track runner,
Okay.
a track star. So this movie is running in this analogy I'm using, they're running the 400-meter dash,
Okay.
which is one lap around the track. This person is going around the track, and they are doing really well for a while. And then they get to about the last 50 yards, and their pants fall down, and they trip over their pants and fall flat on their face, and everyone passes them, and they get last in the race. That was this movie. I was really into like the first hour. And I was like, this is like I was like, this is kind of like a thoughtful, kind of like emotional movie about like grief. And it's not just doing the generic like jump scares and stuff. And it like literally, I mean, this woman is just stoic in this chair. Like visually, I thought that was great in this big not abandoned, like isolated farmhouse and just sitting in this chair. And I was like, that's great. And then they look out and be like, she's closer. And I was like, man. And then this movie just goes off the rails in like a way I've hardly ever seen before. And I am so interested to hear if you thought the same thing. I thought that last 15 minutes was just almost an incoherent mess. And I don't know how they were doing so good for so long and then just completely fell apart.
Andy, I said this during the last episode. I said, I wonder if this is going to be the day that we disagree. And we didn't disagree about Death of Unicorn.
Right.
And we are not going to disagree about The Woman in the Yard. I had the exact same thoughts. For a lot of this movie, I was
like, man, this is
really
good.
well made.
Yeah.
Really,
good
like I said,
acting.
it's kind of smart and thoughtful. And then I'm going to have another rant here, Andy, much like my A24 rant. Horror movie rant. This one's going to be shorter. Horror movies. Stop making the monster in your movies a manifestation of the character's trauma. Stop doing it.
We've seen it.
It's been the theme of the last 10 years. Much
Yeah.
like we were talking about the A24 movies having a commonality. It's been too common. We no longer just have monsters. Every monster is some person's subconscious trauma come to life. And even though like by the end I go, yeah, it was right there in plain sight that this was a movie about trauma and grief, I did not think that that's what the lady was going to be necessarily. It was just going to be totally a manifestation of that. And you're right. By the end, I was watching, trying to keep up. I mean, like I'm locked in and I'm going, all right, what's happening? And now this,
It got so confusing.
so convoluted.
So convoluted. So here's what I would love to do. We don't have to. You're the boss. I would love to try and walk through the last 15 minutes of this movie with you.
Yes.
Okay. Also, spoiler alert, because we're just giving a ton away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's do that, but I do want to walk through a little bit of up to that point. First.
Absolutely.
The good
But I just
stuff
try,
first.
like, maybe
Yeah.
between the two of us, we
Yeah.
can follow this last 15 minutes.
Yeah. So,
And sorry,
No.
I was just so frustrated because I was so like, okay, so like an hour into this movie, before everything goes off the rails, I was like, man, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm gonna get to sit there and talk about this movie with Jeremy and just be like, man, once again, another small budget, movie that just really succeeded, and then it just fell apart so badly, and it was so frustrating to me.
yeah. So one thing I like about this movie, and I guess I probably should have guessed this from the previews, because how long can you draw out the concept of a woman sitting there? But it all takes place in one day.
I love that.
I guess what maybe surprised me is that there wasn't like several days build up. Like, we got to really establish this family, and then
She
one
wakes
day
up?
she shows up. It's one day. The power's out at the house. Kind of makes sense. They're out in this isolated house. And
Yeah.
the sun, just simple line. The power's out again. Gives you the idea, like,
Yep.
things have not been going well.
Yeah.
The phones are dead because there's no power.
And none of
it's
that felt
that's-
like convoluted.
Exactly.
It
That-
all felt natural.
And it served the movie perfectly, because you're going, okay, now we get why they're not calling the cops. Now we get why they're not leaving. Like,
It was really well done.
everything's falling apart at this house. So they don't have dog food anymore. The car hasn't been kept up, so it's not running right. Like, all of this makes sense.
It does.
And they set it up so well
Yep.
for this one day of tension building.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah, they set it up so well while keeping the movie going.
Yeah.
I wasn't like, dude, like, come on, like, we get it. Like, the pacing of that first hour was great, I thought.
I'll push back a little bit on that.
Okay.
Because you said it's like an hour, 25-minute movie. I would have guessed this movie was at least 2 hours, because I felt like it slow burned
Did you?
so long that it wasn't. It's not that I didn't enjoy it, but I did think, like, this is a 15-minute concept that they've stretched into a full-length movie.
Fair enough.
And
Fair enough.
there were just moments where it's like they've got to play it out. They've got to build the tension, because there's not a lot that's going to happen with this lady. Like, once the action happens, it's going to be over. So you got to build to that.
And see, that I liked it, honestly, because I was just so I don't want to jump too far ahead of where you wanted to go, but I loved this idea of, like, so the woman in the yard and this woman in the chair, but I thought that first hour was handled so well, where they were like, the mom, she's like, I'm trying to shield them, like, I don't want to scare my littlest kid, and I'm trying to keep my older son chill so that he doesn't get her upset. And so it's like, there was a lot of scenes where it was just them, and it wasn't just constantly showing you that woman sitting in the chair, but she was just like the dark cloud hanging over everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, everything I'm talking about is I'm talking about prior to the last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I love how they're doing this. And then occasionally it would just cut to show like an outside shot of her just sitting there. And I was like, man, it's got a great creepy vibe. And there wasn't like, it wouldn't do like the big musical cue. It would just show her so still. And I was like, this is awesome. I'm really into this.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of how much I want to get into the plot before we get to the end. I guess we can kind of just go to the end, because, as you said,
Because, I mean, really, we're describing the first hour of the movie. It's just a lot of like the dynamics between this family. And also, I would like to say too, like, sometimes we talk about like, man, give us something different. When I say like, I want my movies to give me something different, I don't always mean some big radical idea. Just the fact that the woman, the mother of this movie, is on crutches. Mm-hmm. That alone is different enough for me. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, this is just an obstacle. In my mind, I'm thinking like, once everything does go crazy, which it's going to, this is going to be a cool like obstacle in this movie. And I like this. This is like something a little different.
Yeah. I did have a lot of respect for the scene. That's probably maybe like the central, this family's in conflict scene, which is them sitting in the living room. The daughter's trying to write her colors and keeps messing up the R's, and the son keeps throwing the ball against the wall.
And the mom just getting so annoyed.
And yeah, the slow burn of, you can
That
see
was
she's about to lose
great.
it, and then she does snap a little bit.
Yeah.
And then she's
like, I'm sorry.
She
like, I'm
realizes
sorry.
what she does. She's very apologetic to the daughter, which is the last person she really snapped at, but she kind of like doesn't apologize to the son, and that you could see he's like irked a little bit by that.
Yeah,
There's just a lot of good fighting coming down,
good.
and it felt real.
It did. Yeah. As a parent, you can identify that with like when your kid is just on your nerves just because they're just being a kid. And, you know, just like, I mean, not to get too nerdy, but like great sound and stuff as that kid's throwing the ball. Like they amp up that sound.
Yes, they do.
So it's just boom, boom, boom. And it makes me so annoyed that this last 15 minutes goes down the way it does.
So let's go to that last 15 minutes. Let's see if we can unpack it.
And I'm saying
a little
15
bit.
minutes. I don't know if it's exactly.
Yeah.
I'll tell you where everything goes south for me is the second they go up in that attic.
Yes.
And then it's just like, wait, what? So
let's see if we can make sense of it. They go in the attic, and the whole thing is, at that point, she's working through the shadows. The woman in the yard is working through the shadows, so they had to go somewhere with no lights.
Yep. And that's fine.
Yeah.
But it's kind of really not established.
Right.
And it's not established why the mom knows this, but you're thinking some kind of big revelation is coming.
Yeah.
So I was like, it's cool visual where like she would move her hand and then like the chandelier would shake. And I was like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. But they get up in the attic. They cover the window that's in the attic.
Okay.
It's dark.
And
they've
I'm
got
still with it.
Yeah, the flashlight, and you're like, this is...
It's a great gimmick.
Yeah,
it's
good
not
jump
original,
scare
but
moment.
it's...
And then there's...
I can tell you exactly where it goes wrong for me.
It already starts to get kind of hard to follow at that point with the lights and what's even happening exactly.
And then that flashlight's spinning, and you're kind of like, well, okay. So then here's the exact moment where the movie goes south. The daughter, the little girl, and I can't remember her name. I'm terrible about that.
Yeah, Annie is the character's name.
Yeah. So she's standing there, and then the monster starts walking towards her slowly. Hey, you're going to be fine. Okay. But then the mom is nowhere to be seen all of a sudden. And the brother, who spent this whole movie being like, no, like, I've got you. Like, I will protect you. I will take care of you. Just sits there. And I was still like, I wasn't like, oh, this is terrible. But I was like, well, okay. I don't really know what's, why is he just.
It was frustrating.
It was frustrating. And then I'm going to say the woman in the chair and Annie, the daughter, like she comes up and like grabs her, like hugs her,
Like
kind
embraces
of.
her.
Embraces her. And they just disappear. And I was like, well, okay. And then all of a sudden the mom's back. She kind of just was conveniently gone, even though they're all in this attic together. Yeah. Right? You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I wish I could correct you. Right. I have no idea what's happening.
And so then the mom and is it Trey? Is that what she calls the son?
I think maybe it's
or like
on IMDb. His name is Taylor, but they do not.
Tay.
Tay.
She calls him
Tay.
Tay.
Yeah.
Tay. So she's like, Tay. Like, I think she, it's basically like, where's your sister? And so then they replay that scene, but this time it's the mom walking towards her, right?
Well, do they do it right away, or is that after? I'm already confused.
So another thing they do that you could rant about horror movies is like, dude, just doing like a ton of quick edits on stuff is not effective. I've seen that a million times too.
Yeah.
But then it just all gets super. I'm like, wait, like they lost me.
Yeah.
Like I literally don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah. So the mom's like, I know we got to go after her, and Ches is like, I know what to do, I guess, to go after her. But
yes, you're right.
They go to. Do they go to the? They
go
vault
down
in the gun room. She like walks through the. I don't even know what she walks into.
But then she's like in
a long weird hallway
that we've never seen. And then she's back with her husband. So she's having
she like walked basically through like a portal to another reality almost. Yeah.
So I was like, well, okay, that's fine, I guess. And they replay this conversation that they did establish that. We're like that's how the movie opens. Like she's watching old videos of him. So I was like, okay, maybe we're going to rein it back in. And then it cuts to like just Tay, I think, just walks in, and the mom and the daughter are like on a bed, and she's like, everything's okay now. Kind of. And she's like, I got her. And you're just like, what? Everything just falls. Like, if you have seen this movie, I think you would understand that our confusion is valid.
Yeah.
And these are all like these just really quick scenes.
So, and we get the cut of her being the woman in the chair when she shows up.
Yeah.
She's pulling the thing down like she doesn't know it's her. And then we see that her, from early in the movie, is approaching, talking to her, having that conversation she had before. And the first part of it makes sense where she's like, how did I get here? And her other character's like, I was going to ask you the same thing. And you're like, oh, like that sort of makes sense. But they don't show the whole conversation because the last part of the conversation wouldn't make any sense.
Makes no sense at all.
Where she's like, calls her out like, you and I both know your husband's not coming back all
Today's
menacing.
the
It's
day.
like, yeah, like none of that would make any sense from this new perspective.
New perspective. And then where are we? And then they're all together again. And the mom, and then the woman in the okay, so she's with her kids now. They're just kind of magically reunited. So that was just super clunky. And then she's like, hey, take your sister downstairs. And he's just like, okay. And he does. And then it's the mom, whose name I don't remember. What's her name? Ramona. And the woman in the chair. And all of a sudden, the woman in the chair just starts giving us really lame exposition. Like, I'm the dark corners of your brain. And I was like, you're like, oh, okay. So, like, number one, I agree with you that horror movies need to stop making the villain like a manifestation of guilt or trauma. But if that's what you wanted to do, fine. But why did the previous like 10 minutes of the movie have to be so almost incoherent?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like all these, I feel like I'm doing a terrible job of walking through this, but like
Because
I said,
it's
in my
hard to walk
defense,
through.
this is how you feel when you're watching the movie. Like all these things just start happening, and none of them really make any sense based on the previous hour of the movie.
Yeah. It really feels like the first hour was one thing, the last 10 minutes was another thing, and they had no idea how to bridge the gap between the two.
So they just started doing
5 minutes
everything
of wildness that makes people kind of have to reorient and go, oh, this is what the movie is now, and not realize how disconnected it feels from the first hour.
They don't pull it off at all.
No.
And so then so I guess at least at some point you can kind of like, okay, like they did a really crappy job of getting us there, of like bridging that gap between the first hour and here. But at least I guess I see what's going on now. The woman in the yard is just this basically like it's Ramona's like suicidal thoughts.
Yes.
And at the beginning of the movie, she sits up in bed and she says, give me strength. You take it at that time as an audience, like, give me the strength to just get through another day. What I kind of took it like, now that we got this new perspective, is like, I want the strength to have the courage to kill myself.
Well, and the lady basically says it. She's like, what do you pray every day? She's like, give me strength. Like, and she says, like, she tries to make the defense. Ramona goes like, to take care of my kids, whatever. She's like, no, that's not what you mean.
Yeah.
And yeah,
it's to kill yourself.
She's like, she says, you got rid of every bullet for that gun except for one. You know, what is that for?
Yeah.
You know, like,
so if you could just eliminate that super weird 10 minutes where there's all these different things happening and stuff, I would still be in agreement with you that like, oh, we've seen this so many times. But at least it's, a coherent movie with a straight line. Yeah. It's that really weird spot that just messes everything up.
Yeah. So then they get the gun and she's like holding the gun up to her, like she's kind of fighting it, like she still doesn't have the strength.
And it's really like helping pull it's really kind of dark,
very dark, and to the point that like people stood up behind me while that scene's going on, and as they're walking, I could tell it was like two ladies and two younger girls.
They just couldn't handle it.
They were walking, and I'm like, yeah, well, first off, maybe you shouldn't have brought children to this movie, but also like I had a feeling like I kind of get it. If you're there with children, you're probably like, this is a bit much to be showing my girls. Let's go out.
Yeah, that's a whole other rant though. Do your research, parents. Know what movie you're taking your kids to.
If they would have stuck around another minute though, they would have known like, again, we've already said spoilers. It doesn't happen. She doesn't.
And then all of a sudden her kids are back.
Yeah, the kids she sent away, which was another weird scene because she was like, let me say goodbye to my kids first. There's no emotional goodbye. She just basically goes down and goes, kids, you got to leave.
Go. And you understand what she's doing. She wants, like, because she does love her kids.
Right.
But it's like, this is so painful. I just go.
Yeah.
But she just asked for a moment to say goodbye.
Yeah, you just thought she'd at least say, like, hey, I just want y'all to know I love you, but you got to get out of here.
And you're going to be okay or something. So that's weird. And then they're just back.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just goes from night to day, and all of a sudden the farm. So one of the big things through this movie is like they bought this fixer-upper and they struggled to fix it up, and it caused trouble in their it caused trouble in their marriage, and da-da-da-da-da. And there's this this thing throughout the movie where the husband's like, we need to name this farm. Mm-hmm. And she's like, I don't know what to name. And he's like, oh, we're going to name it. And then all of a sudden it has a name. And it's like, okay, so everything's just magically fine now. But so much of the first hour is her kids reacting to the woman in the yard. Yeah. Like they can see her.
Yeah.
So it's like, it just leaves you going like, even if you were trying to make a movie about the woman in the yard as a representation of this mother's grief and suicidal thoughts, because you also find out that she was actually the one driving the car.
Right.
She lied to her kids, da-da-da. But it's like, okay, that's fine. But then your movie doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the movie is Tay, her son, and him like, you know what, I'm going to kind of become the man of the house, and I'm going to go stand up to this thing in the yard. But the thing in the yard really wasn't there in the logic of this movie. Mm-hmm. But so much of the movie is about her children reacting to the woman in the yard.
Yeah, you're right.
So even in the context of what the filmmaker was trying to do, it doesn't make sense.
Well, and even right along with that, you've got the dog who's out in the yard barking at the lady like crazy, and then you see the shadow approach the dog, and then the dog's gone, his chain's buried, and you're just like, she killed the dog.
She killed the chickens.
Yeah, at the end of the movie, the dog just comes running back in, and you're like, okay, so what part of this, are we supposed to believe like none of this really happened? Even if it like they all envisioned it, did everything just go back to normal because none of it really happened, or what? Yeah.
Or like, I mean, much darker, but like, did she kill herself, and this is some kind of like her version of the afterlife? Like,
I didn't even think about that, but it's entirely possible, and maybe that's what the sign was meant to show, is like, this is not reality anymore. This is a new fantasy world, or heaven-like world. Here's
the thing: I don't need my movies to wrap everything up in a perfect bow. Yeah. There's a lot of movies I like that are very kind of like, I don't know if open-ended is the right word, but not everything just falls perfectly into place. Yeah. A lot of your more prestige movies are like that. A lot of Scorsese movies are like that. Tarantino's movies are like that, where it comes to an ending and it's a satisfying ending, but it doesn't mean everything just worked out for everybody. Right. So I don't need that, but I do need to have some sense of understanding what I just watched. And one of the worst things a movie can do, I think, is like contradict itself. And I just think this movie does that so badly, where you're like, okay, so, but what about the first hour of this movie? And, it's so, I don't know, we may have done a terrible job walking through that, but
yeah,
it's so frustrating. Because the first hour of this movie to me was so well done that I cannot sit here and be like, I hate this movie.
Yeah.
Because, there's a really crappy 15, 20 minutes at the end, but it doesn't erase the fact that beginning I thought was really well done.
Yeah. Much like I talked about with Death of a Unicorn, like, how am I going to feel about this movie at the end of the year? By the time it's in the year, I might look back and just be like, oh, yeah, remember how well crafted those like tense scenes were? The family in the living room with the ball and the writing. Like, that might be what I remember. And I just say that was a movie that's better than you would expect for a very cheap, simple genre movie. Mm-hmm. Or I might go, oh, yeah, I remember that movie being a mess at the end. I'm not sure what over time is going to be the thing that really sticks.
Yeah, I don't know either, but man, I wish they would have stuck the landing, because we could have been sitting here saying, man, like, what a really effective thriller, and what ended up being, like I said, for a while there, you're like, this is a pretty thoughtful look about grief and like survivor's guilt and stuff like that, and just I didn't expect that.
Yeah, there is the chance. Here's the thing about it being such a mess at the end and not leaving a great taste in my mouth, is it makes me less inclined to revisit.
Yeah,
but I do feel like there's the chance that I could revisit this and it make a lot more sense the second time around, maybe. And so it could be one that, by the end of the year, maybe I was like, let's give it another chance, watch it. And then like I go, oh, now that I know where it's going, I can see the signs, and
things make a little bit more sense.
It's a little more tightly woven than I thought, and then I have a lot more respect for it, and could listen back to this episode and go, wow, I totally missed so many things when we talked about it the first time. I don't know.
Maybe. But I want to go to your point for a second, where stop making the monster of your movie a manifestation of something, because I think you could have still made this movie and still had the elements of, she has grief and she has this survivor's guilt and she is carrying this secret that she lied to her kids and it just actually have been like, this is just some kind of, whatever you want to say, a demon or a monster or something. And you still could have made those two things converge without completely going off the rails with trying to do what they were trying to do.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Yeah. Drop that gimmick and you can still make your movie and you can, like I said, you can still have all these elements you want.
Well, because we talked about it. Great movies have your surface conflict and then you've got a separate emotional subcontext. And what these movies are all trying to do is they're trying to blend those two together where the surface conflict is the sub-level conflict. And
you can have both.
Yeah. That's actually what makes the best movies is when the conflict that you have on the surface is not the conflict that's on the interior.
This might sound like a stupid example, but think of like Scream or something like that. Like Neve Campbell, is this recurring character through all these movies. And she has these things of like her mother died and stuff. So it's like, but Ghostface is still an actual person trying to kill her.
Yeah.
It's like now if they made, they made this movie, it'd be like Ghostface was just her, repressed guilt about her dead mother. And it's like, no, you can do both and still make an entertaining movie, but it has I don't know if a sweetness is the right word, but it's like there is a little bit more under the surface, but it's still just a horror movie.
Yeah. I mean, thank goodness in Jaws, the shark wasn't just a manifestation of Quint's PTSD from his naval days.
Exactly. That's a probably way better example. Like you can do both. We need to drop it. And we need to drop it, but like if you are going to do it, dude, it's got to make sense. And you can't just start doing all these random weird scenes that they do in this movie. It's such a just literally sticks out like a sore thumb. And it was so frustrating because I was like, man, they are doing a really good job with this movie. And then it just goes off the rails.
Yeah. I do want to talk about something that I can't believe we're this far in the podcast we haven't mentioned yet is that I really do want to shout out the actors in this movie who I think did a really good job. Danielle Deadweiler did a great job as the mom.
I thought she was excellent.
Being unlikable, and yet you've got to root for her.
You're like, I get it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She really, she kind of pushes that line where you're
yeah. It's like there's a couple different scenes in the movie where something minor will happen to the little girl, and she'll look at the brother and be like, you got to watch her. And you want to be like, you watch her. You're her mom, but you're like, but I get it, man. I get it. And she does such a good job. That's why I sound so she does such a good job on her crutches. Like she really looks like she has an injury.
Yeah.
And it's like, that probably is not easy to film over a long period of time on crutches.
Yeah. I just remembered one other weird moment, and I want to ask you about this because I had forgotten about it till just now. The moment where she's picking at her scars. Yeah. And there's like a string and she's
what was that?
And then it just cuts and it's nothing.
It's nothing.
Yeah, I don't
know. That's weird.
Strange.
We haven't established that there's no meaning for the long, it was supposed to be a hair, a string. That was really strange.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. But she does honestly, I thought everyone in this movie did a good job.
Well, let's just say the son.
I thought he was
I thought he did really good. I was like, this kid is crushing it. The thing that shouldn't have surprised me, but surprised me a little bit when I looked up is he's 20 years old in real life. Mm-hmm. He's playing someone who's obviously not old enough to drive. That's the only thing that's
15.
established. So 14, 15, somewhere there. I was like, he looks that young, which is why I was like, this is a phenomenal child acting performance. And I realized, well, he's a young man who he's
young to be pulling this off
for sure. And my note was just, we'll have to see is it just genuinely good acting that's allowing him to seem so young? I'm curious to see what he'll look like in his next role. Will he play a little older, or is he just going to be one of those guys that he looks so young that's going to work against him in his career? I don't know. It's just it's just a curiosity because when I was watching this, it's like this kid's crushing it.
I thought so too, and I was like, it's got to be really hard to be playing I'm just a kind of a mopey, grumpy teenager, but he's likable. I thought he did a really good job, and the little girl doesn't really have a lot to do. A lot of it is just kind of sit here and color so you're not scared, but she did a good job.
She used to be the kind of sweet, innocent one that you are just purely don't let anything happen to the little girl.
Yeah, and she pulls it off. So kudos to them.
Yeah, even the guy who showed up as the husband in his small part, he did a good job. It was just everybody acted very well. The director, whose name I will not pronounce correctly,
The dude that directed The Shallows.
He directed The Shallows. He's directed a few horror movies. He did The Orphan. He did House of Wax.
Mm-hmm.
I've not seen The Orphan. House of Wax, I think I've established before, is the only movie I've ever walked out of.
It's a really
in
bad
theaters.
movie. That was just a terrible time for horror.
Yeah.
It was a really bad time.
I did like The Shallows.
The Shallows is fun.
But he's got a weird career. He did a lot of those kind of post-Taken generic Liam Neeson action movies. Mm-hmm. He did do the movie Carry On last year, which we both really enjoyed. Yeah. So he went from Carry On to this. Talk about a dramatic difference in type of movie between Carry On and this.
I would say like I liked I don't know what the right word is. The restraint maybe he showed in that first hour. Like I said, I love, instead of just like, well, the woman in the chair, like I love like the stillness and all that stuff. Is like, this is good stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I hope he continues to do movies like this because it's not like, man, this dude sucks.
No. One thing that I have found myself thinking in a lot of movies lately is like, what's the bad version of this movie look like? Mm-hmm. And maybe it's just like, what's kind of cheap? What's the B version of this movie look like? Mm-hmm. Because one thing that's clear with this movie is it doesn't have a big budget. The budget was $12 million when I looked up. But it looks great.
It does look good.
That's what I mean. Like, and the cinematography is good.
Great
like,
location.
There's moments where it's like, just a pan of them doing something in a room, and it's like a close up of like just the decoration on the table or something, and everything's just shot very well like that. And I'm going like, that's what good movies do. They they make even a simple establishing shot like this look really good. Yep. And the clarity is amazing. That's one thing I continue to harp on with movies these days. Is just the quality of the picture.
Yeah,
I look at it and go like, "This is amazing" up on the big screen. Yeah. And I go like, so I go back to like, what is the B movie this look like? This is one question I wanted to ask though: is do you think I tend to be the type that I like the really clear picture? Like I know some people complain about that in movies. Like movies these days look too good and too clean and stuff. And with like a movie like this, is like, was it maybe a little too clean? Maybe this movie needed to be a little grainier, grittier. Yeah. I don't know. Like, and this is movie nerd stuff that we're talking about now, but we're at this point in the podcast. We can talk about something a little movie nerdy. Sure. Like, was this movie maybe a little too cleanly shot?
No, I don't think it was. Because I think that
and I'll default to you because you're the horror movie guy.
I think it's dependent on the movie, which is like kind of stating the obvious, but like, I think it looked so good to have the house. There's a lot of just like white and openness, and then to have just this woman who is the woman in the chair just draped in black, and for that to be so clear, I thought that really popped, and I thought that made it more effective. And one thing I did notice, there was times, which kudos to the filmmaker, where like the kids or the mom would just walk past the window and you'd see her, and it wouldn't like, it's like she's just in the background. And I thought the clearness and the crispness of the movie, I thought that looked good.
Yeah.
And I thought it added to the kind of just the tension of this movie. So I thought it served it well to have like that crisp and that clearness and that cleanness, like you say.
Yeah. Really, this is where it's really going to show that we're doing two podcasts back to back. I really should have brought this up more with Death of a Unicorn, because that was an easier movie to go like, what's the B version of this? Because Unicorn as
I think it would have been a better movie
is if it was like just the B movie version. I mean, I was literally sitting there going like, just the difference between this and Velocipaster is $15 million in budget.
That's it. And Paul Rudd and Jenna Ortega.
Right. Yeah.
I think that would have been better served as like this is just literally like a bunch of unicorns show up and start mauling people.
Yeah. If it was a B movie, like, yeah. And that's, again, kind of the A24 formula is let's take a B movie
and elevate it.
And elevate it. And maybe it didn't need to be elevated. This Woman in the Yard did feel like psychological horror elevated. It's elevated horror, I think, is what you categorize this as. And because of that, like, I think it's what made me with it for most of the movie. As I said, the previews made it look like just a typical jump scary, here's a creepy thing happening. And it wasn't that at all.
And again, I know I've said this a lot. That is where my frustration comes from. Because, like, man, you guys were really onto something. You were really doing something good. And I was like, I cannot believe how, like, restrained this movie is and how they're avoiding which I'm sure is so tempting to just so many jump scares with this woman. I mean, they do it a little bit, like when Tay goes to try and start the car Like he turns around and sees her in the mirror and then turns back around and she's not there. But that was well done. I don't mind that stuff if it's good. And then like there was a really cool, they got good use out of things that felt real. Like you're talking about the power, the phones. There's also the clothes hanging up on the clothesline. And that like, it's like a sheet.
When it flaps. Yeah.
And then it flaps and she's gone. And it's like, again, I'm not saying it's really original, but when it's done well, it's effective.
Yeah, I just realized that scene is more effective. So again, thinking back through things, Tay is trying to get the car started, and he feels the woman in the yard like is coming after to get him. And then when he's finally leaving, and he takes a swing because he thinks he's around the corner, and it ends up being his mom. And then when you know, like by the end, the whole thing is his mom, and what's her manifestation.
I know.
So like, I guess
you're
that
right.
is actually
Maybe
maybe that's a little smarter now that I look back.
Once
at
my
it
frustration kind of dies down, I probably will end up. I mean, I'm going to be more positive than negative about this movie.
And that's what we talk about a lot of times when we're ranty and mad about a movie. It's oftentimes because the whole movie's not bad. It's because there was so much good that the bad makes us more frustrated.
It's frustrating, yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to applaud like I was dogging on the writing in Death of a Unicorn. I do want to applaud the writing in this movie because I've said this a million times, but I always like it when they can do the thing where it's like, man, this kid, like, as an audience member, I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, this kid just needs to get fed up with his mom and take matters into his own hands. And anytime I would think that, he would. Like, I thought that, and I guess when I say the pacing, part of what I mean is, like, they, like, the way they let the Tay kid, like, okay, I'll sit here like my mom told me to. They let that breathe for just long enough, and then he's like, you know what, forget this. And it's like, thank you. Because that's what that's what probably a normal person would do. And then when he's finally like, I have had it, and he locks his mom in a room and gets that gun, it's like, yep, it was time. He's like, Mom, this is not getting better. We have no way, like you. And I like it too when it's like, she's like, oh, she's probably from the nursing home. And Tay's not just an idiot who's like, oh, okay, she's probably from the, like, he's like, what? Like, I like when they do that stuff. It's rewarding as an audience member.
Yeah, and then again, we talk about liking when you show us things early on that come into play later, but it's not obvious that you're telegraphing something. When he gets that gun, he picks up the box of bullets and there's nothing in there, so he checks and goes, well, there is one bullet in here, and then later it comes into play.
Yeah.
Like the lady says, you got rid of all the bullets except for one. You go, well, I did see that. You're right. You showed me that without there being, like, there was an obvious reason
shoving
why.
it in my face.
Yeah, like you get why he checked for bullets and goes, well, I don't have any, but I've got one.
Okay, I'm starting to calm down a little bit now that we're talking through some of this. Also, I do want to shout out the scene where Tay does go outside with the gun. He's like, I've had it. And he's like, lady, get off my property or I'm going to shoot you. I love it when they write characters as like, we're just cutting to the chase. And that's another scene where I thought they did a great job of showing like almost restraint. And they just let the tension, it's really just him. He's pointing the gun, but she's just sitting there. And then she stands up. And someone in the theater I was in, when that woman stood up, they were like, oh. And I was like, okay, that's always a good sign in a horror movie. Yeah. And then she just stands there. And I was like, dang, like, what's about, like, it also got you to a good place at that moment in time where you're like, I really don't know what's going to happen right here.
Yeah.
Is he going to shoot her? Like, da-da-da. So it's like good stuff.
Yeah. Also, one other thing, spoilery at the end, is we see a painting by Ramona, the mom, and she assigned her R backwards. The way that the daughter is always doing. And I was like, I don't even really know what we're supposed to take from that other than like, there's, does the daughter do it because she's seen the mom do it? Or is it just saying like, a lot of this has been a manifestation in her mind? I don't know. But
I bet you there's someone that's already made a YouTube video that's like, when the R's are reversed, they're not in reality.
Yeah.
And there's probably, maybe I just need to go see this movie again. I don't know.
But I do want to remind you, there was an incoherent 5-minute period of this
movie. There
was.
Yeah,
like,
we are right about that.
Yes.
We are right about that. I am calming down a little bit, and I am definitely able to see more of the good now that we're talking through it. That is a mess, though.
Yeah.
Like, we cannot ignore that. That's a mess.
Yeah. Are you ready for my favorite bit of trivia from this movie?
Yes.
This bit is so random. I don't understand what it's from. I had to check twice to make sure I was still on the right movie's trivia.
Okay.
It says this. During filming, Snakes were only present on set on Tuesdays and Thursdays as part of a unique agreement between the producers and the local snake community. What?
There's no snakes in the movie, by the way.
Also, who is the local snake community?
And why do they have any say? Why do they get any say in what happens in this movie? Like, the director's like, he's sitting there, he's like, oh man, it's Tuesday, and the snake community says there has to be snakes here.
All I can think when I read this is one of two things. One, this is the craziest out of place, made up trivia I've ever seen in my life. Or two, there was a plot line that involved snakes that was such a headache for this director. Eventually, he just cut all the snakes, and now we read the trivia and go, what the heck are you talking about? This problem with having snakes only on set twice a week.
A fun follow-up story would be like the dude that directed this. It's like you see a headline where it's like, whatever his name is, like runs afoul of the snake community. And now there's like this big rivalry.
Turns out that entire ending would have made all the sense if only there were snakes. Yeah, there was a through line that the snakes explained.
And it's like, I can imagine the director sitting down with the actors and be like, guys, I'm really sorry, but as you film today, there's just going to be snakes everywhere. And we can't stop it because the snake community says so. And the actors are just like, well, okay, like I get it. The snake community has spoken. That could be another new running bit on our podcast where it's like, what would the snake community, like what would their demands have been for this movie?
Yeah, the LSC, local snake community.
Like how much influence did they have in what happened in this movie?
That's too funny. Andy, this might be the trickiest one that we've ever done because such a small cast of characters, very ethnically distinct cast of characters.
Yes.
Where in the world would we put Uncle Chip in The Woman in the Yard?
I think what would have been really funny is if, like, in that first 30 minutes or so when the woman in the yard is just sitting there, if all of a sudden it cuts to the perspective of the woman in the yard and she's just sitting there and like you almost like you get a monologue and she's like, oh man, like I've got them creeped out, things are going well, and then all of a sudden Uncle Chip just like he's just driving like out for a country drive and he just pulls up in like a pickup truck and he's like, hey, how you doing? And just kills the vibe completely. And the woman in black's like, go away. Like, I'm trying to scare this family. And Uncle Chip just won't go away. I think that'd be really good.
Yeah. Man, yeah, there's not a lot of like easy places.
There's not. I guess like he could have been their waiter.
Yeah.
So you get a flashback where the husband and wife are in a fight at a restaurant.
Yes.
And it's like they're in this big fight and all of a sudden Uncle Chip's just like, hey guys, or how was the steak tonight?
He's at the bar, so when she's storming out, as she's going by, he's like, I couldn't help but notice you and your husband are okay, all right, I'll see you later.
Yeah. That'd be great. Or like, yeah, like he can tell she's mad, and so Uncle Chip like hits on her. He's like, call me. Yeah. Like, if it doesn't work out here, just give me a call.
That's right. Oh man.
I think there's probably a lot of good material to be mined out of like the Uncle Chip character with an all black cast.
Probably.
And just trying to like fit in with the black community.
Yeah.
Also, I do want to shout out, like, not to be annoying or whatever, but it's like you don't get a lot of like all black horror movies.
Yeah.
So that was kind of refreshing, like the black family, like just a different spin. Like if like normally this would have been just a white family.
Yeah.
Like black family on a farmhouse. Like I liked it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say also there was distinct crowds at my theater.
Yeah.
Like you go in, you could basically tell. I can tell who's going to see Woman in the Yard. I can tell who's going to see A Working Man. I can tell who's going to see Snow White.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah.
And I could tell nobody was going to see Death of a Unicorn.
Right. And no one did.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, good for it. You know, good depiction of a black family going through grief and a very like that's what we were talking about is didn't feel shoehorned in any way. It felt like it was written as it could have been any family, and they're just like, why not be a black family?
Yeah,
and then
I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it was a good crowd in my theater, and a lot of the theater was African American.
Nice. So, nice. Yeah, it made I think it made just under $10 million this weekend off a $12 million budget. I just don't know what kind of legs this movie's gonna have.
I don't either, but I will say I don't know how much competition there will be next week. I mean, the Minecraft movie is the big movie coming out. And it's not going to be a bomb. We're already like, you could see that bomb coming a mile away.
I don't know, man. I
Maybe
feel like
not.
I'm so out of touch with the Minecraft movie and stuff. Like, I don't know what's going to happen.
That's true.
With
It's
that.
because I have zero connection to Minecraft as a
None.
game.
None.
Anyways, I can't understand why the game is so popular. So maybe I'm going to be surprised if the movie's a hit.
I have no clue. Since this is just a movie podcast, we should throw out we rarely rejoice in the failures of movies, but Snow White is falling flat on its face.
Yes.
For crying out loud, learn a lesson
Yeah.
and stop making these stupid movies.
And I know a lot of it's being made out to be like, well, it got political, and for political reasons, it's falling on its face. But
Maybe people just didn't want to
it
go.
that could be true. But I've seen a couple clips from the movie, and every clip I've seen, I've been like, that looks
Awful.
terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just saying.
Yeah.
It's failing miserably.
All right. I have one more rant to do today, Andy. I've done 2 rants. This one is about the movie-going experience. Andy, we often talk about how we need people to go see movies. We love movies. We want people to support movies. We want theaters to thrive.
Yeah.
I'm a hypocrite, Andy, because you know what really annoys me at theaters?
Crowds.
People. People are the worst at theaters. So yesterday I went to saw Death of the Unicorn on Friday afternoon, knowing I was going to want to watch NCAA tournament basketball games on Friday night, Saturday night. I was like, I got to find times to see the movie in the afternoon. So I went Death of the Unicorn. First showing that was available. It was like a 1:10 showing, and I was the only person in the theater. Nobody else was around. The only other people in the theater there was a bunch of old people going to see the Chosen Last Supper movie. Again, being able to identify the crowds.
Yeah.
And plus, I heard them talking. That's what they're going to go see. But it's like, yep, that makes sense. Then I go yesterday, and it's like pretty good parking lot, like full of cars. I'm like, that's nice. I go in. There's a lot of people in the movie theater. Both movies that I saw, which was Death of a Unicorn and Woman in the Yard, I had bought my tickets 2 days before, was the first person to buy tickets in any theater.
Yeah.
And I always pick the middle of the, like, basically top aisle where the projection booth comes out. So there's rows behind me, but where my back is the projection booth. I don't like people sitting behind me. I just don't like it. And both of them, I go in there, and there's people already sitting in my seat. Both times, kind of like middle-aged dad. First one was with his son, who looked like he's, like, teenager, older high school kid. Second time was with a little girl and his wife. And both times I walk down the aisle, and I'm looking at the seats, and I'm start to sit in the seat just a couple down from me, and I look at him and I just go, that's my seat. And in the first one, the dad, he's eating popcorn, he just goes, oh, do you want it? And my thought was, well, yeah, when I picked it, it's because that's what I wanted. But I just said, nah, it's fine. And I just sat in the seat a couple down, and I'm just shaking my head like, why would you come in here and sit in that seat? The one grace I'll give him is I came in after most of the previews were done, intentionally trying to miss previews.
Right.
And I was like, maybe they said, hey, nobody's here. Let's just scoot down a couple seats, whatever. So the next movie I go in and I'm going in before even the previews have started, make sure nobody's in my seat. And these people are already in my seat. And I walk down and I'm just sitting. And again, I'm not even necessarily going to fight the fight, but I just always want to acknowledge and let the people know, like, you're doing something wrong. And so I look at the guy, he said, that's my seat. And he goes, and he's like makes this big fuss about him and his family moved down a couple seats. And I'm like, I didn't even ask you to move. I just wanted to acknowledge it.
Yeah.
If you just said like my bad or anything, it would have been fine.
Right.
And so the whole movie, like I was fuming during the previews, and I just want to keep going and be like, so what were you thinking when you're like, hey, this isn't my seat, but I'm just going to sit in it? Mm-hmm. Like, what's going through your mind when you do that? Maybe don't be that person who does this and then acts like I'm the jerk because I'm pointing out you're sitting in the seat that I picked.
Yeah.
Like, just get out of my freaking way. Don't be in my seat.
My biggest thing is like, I've always gone to a lot of movies, but going to more than ever since we're doing this podcast, just to the public at large, stop overcomplicating this. Mm-hmm. Stop overcomplicating going to a movie. Like where I go to the Savoy Theater, you have to pick your seat when you buy your ticket, which is silly, but whatever. It is what it is. People, they are not asking you to choose. You're not making a major life decision. Look at the screen and pick a seat. People take way too long to do that and then still manage to not get it right. And it's like, I've said this on here before. I go into the theater and I'm amazed at, like, I haven't actually had the whole someone's in my seat near as much as you have. But what amazes me is watching people and how hard they are working to try and figure out where the seat they picked is. Mm. People walk in and they're looking at their ticket, looking up and down the aisles like they are solving a calculus equation. It is very clearly labeled, people.
Yeah.
Please stop overcomplicating this. Go to the theater, know what time your movie starts, pick your spot, go sit in it, and just sit there for an hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. So I'm not done complaining about people.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not mean to interrupt.
That's on that particular subject of seats. I'm done with that. People talking in the movie theater, people loud with snacks in the movie theater. That's something I forget about when I'm not in a very crowded theater very often, but people are just loud.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes I have snacks. I'm very conscientious of like, if the movie's quiet, like just, you can't do it. Yeah. You got to wait till there's some noise.
Wait till there's an
explosion.
explosion.
Yeah. And then people with their phones. Oh my gosh, people with your phones. I know people think they're being so discreet when they hold their phone low.
We know.
That bright light in a theater is
It's like the
huge.
sun.
It's like the sun. This lady sitting in front of me waited till the scene in The Woman in the Yard where they're in the attic and everything goes dark before she gets her phone out. And the saying it's like the sun is exactly right. So bright. And I'm just sitting there going like, do I say something? And of course it's like every time you're like, we're on the verge, like I'm just going to be like, I'm trying to think, how do I say this kindly? Like, just excuse me, miss. Like, that's very distracting. Yeah. You know, they put it away. Oh, thank goodness they put it away.
Get it back out.
And then you're starting to pay attention and goodness. How is it that there's this giant screen, but all I can see is this bright light right here?
Yeah.
And she just kept doing it. And I'm like, already, we talked about it, hard to follow the end of Woman in the Yard. And on top of that, I'm literally sitting there doing this to block the light that she's seeing or that she's shining.
It's such a sad state of the world where it's like, have we just gotten this rude as a society? Like,
yes.
The whole thing of going to a movie is like, why don't you know to be quiet during this movie? That's what I don't understand. Because like I said, going to so many movies, I haven't had people in my seat, but I've had, and I hate to pick on them, it's a lot of times it's younger people, like college age or like my boys' age, and it's like, you're being so loud. Why did you just not stay at home to talk and horse around? Like, why didn't you just do that at home where it's perfectly acceptable to act this way? Why did you come somewhere where the whole point of being in this place is to not act like this? Mm-hmm. Don't be loud during a movie. Whatever you think is worth talking about, it can surely wait 20 more minutes till this movie is over with.
Yeah.
It's getting to be, it's frustrating.
Yeah, somebody's got to invent technology. I mean, it probably already exists, but it's just not in movie theaters to just like shut down cell phones. In like when you walk into the theater,
it will not
work. Like the light won't come on, nothing. Like it just.
And I've even seen it to the point where it's like, you know, because like you're elevated, and so you can kind of see down to the people in front of you. And I want to be like, dude, you're answering your snaps. Yeah. I can see what you're doing.
Yeah, it's never anything important.
You're snapping someone. Like, you're telling me that couldn't have waited till you weren't in a movie theater. It's really frustrating.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't be doing this if I was also guilty of this. I have great movie etiquette.
Yeah.
My phone, I will text my family and be like, hey guys, like I'm at the movies. It's an hour and 45-minute long movie. Like, unless there is an emergency, like just please, you know, don't text me for a little bit.
Yeah, there's been times where I can feel my phone like blowing up in my pocket. Like
whatever it is, it can wait.
Yeah, and I'm like, does that make me curious? Sure. Am I going to pull it out? I am absolutely not going to pull it out of my pocket.
Mm-hmm. Also, if you I'm a parent. I get it. You want to make sure your kids are okay. I get that. People, phones have brightness settings.
Yes.
If you absolutely insist on taking a quick, like I've been in theaters where I've seen someone be like, boom, boom. I'm like, I don't really have that much of a problem with that. No. They checked really quickly to make sure their loved ones were okay, and then that phone immediately went back in their purse or their pocket. That's okay. If you're going to do that, turn your brightness down. It's not that hard to do.
Yeah.
Be a good person. Like, just be a good person. Yeah. Be considerate. It's not that hard. It's not that hard.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah. I don't really hate people. I just want to be clear about that. I just hate people who are rude.
You're rude, and it's like, dude, why, like, going back to your thing, it's like, why are you surprised that this person pointed out that you're sitting in their seat?
Yeah.
Like, why are you annoyed? Like, there's literally hundreds of other seats you can choose from.
Yeah. And in the case of the first movie I saw where I didn't make them move, and so I just sat a couple seats down from them, you know, just left a gap, sat down, because there was nobody else in that row. right before the movie started, so a couple minutes later, a guy comes up and sits on the end of the row, but he's kind of looking down, and I had the feeling of like, I'm probably in his seat, and I just wanted to say out loud to him, hey, just so you know, I'm not the butthole here.
Yeah.
It's this guy. He took my seat.
Yeah.
He forced me into probably your seat. You
sit in the wrong seat, and it starts this domino effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just sit in the right seat, people. It's like I said, don't overcomplicate going to a movie.
Yeah.
Pick a seat, sit in it, be quiet, keep your phone away, and enjoy the movie. It's really simple, or it should be.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes. This PSA was brought to you by the LSC, the local snake community.
Snake community. Thank you for your service to our communities. It's like, does the local snake community keep snakes away? No, they bring snakes to where you are.
That is just the mystery of all mysteries. I'd love to hear that
Let's
explained.
not let that go away. We need to bring that up more often when we pod, the local snake community.
Absolutely. All right. Well, we went kind of all over the place with this podcast, but it's fun. Yeah.
And this is a movie I would love feedback on.
Yes.
Did we overcomplicate it? I mean,
It's entirely possible.
Was there something there that we didn't see? And go see this movie and enjoy that first hour, because it is a well done, thoughtful first hour of a movie that didn't really, quite frankly, didn't need to be thoughtful.
Yeah. I think the one thing that I'll say about that, like the recommendation to go see, is I was a little surprised while that ending's happening that there wasn't like disclaimers with this movie. Like, be aware, people, this could be triggering for
pretty
people,
heavy
for people. Yeah. Who
I did notice during the credits that, the thing pops up of like, if you're struggling. Did you see that?
I didn't.
I sat there just for a minute or two, and it pops up pretty early into the end credits, like the National Suicide Hotline number and stuff like that. And so, I mean, it's like, kudos to the filmmakers for wanting to draw attention to this stuff. So I don't want to like sound like a jerk. It's just like, it just got really messy there for a little bit.
Yeah.
I know we're wrapping up. I do want to shout out real quickly. Also, just great. I don't know if you'd call it costume design. The woman in the chair, that black thing she's draped with, going back to like the clearness stuff, that looked great.
Yeah.
And it was so simple. Simple is better, as we often say on here. And this movie is a good example of it for the first hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Good call.
Yeah.
All right. Shout out to John Carpenter, who wrote a score we'll never hear.
Indeed, he did.
Maybe that'll leak. I'd love for that to be a leak that we get, because I want to know. Like,
here's the John Carpenter Death of a Unicorn score that you never got to hear.
Yeah.
Wait, right? Death of a Unicorn?
Yeah, it was Death of a Unicorn. What if it's just a tremendous score that...
Or what if it's like it's like jazz music or something, and it's just so out of place?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that, I know that was our previous episode.
Yeah.
Like, the dude wrote the score for Halloween.
Yeah.
Which is one of the best and most famous scores ever. And then this punk who is directing his first movie is like, sorry, John Carpenter, just not really what I was wanting.
Yeah.
This has been Jeremy and Andy just vent a lot of frustrations.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us for that vent sesh.
Thank you.
And hopefully you enjoyed our conversation about these movies. If you've got thoughts, please let us know.
Yeah, please. I enjoyed talking about these movies with you.
Exactly.
I always do, but these movies in particular, I was really excited to dive in with you.
And we'll be back next week with a new episode. Not even sure what we'll be
here
about, but you'll get content from us coming up some
Don't
point. Worry. And it'll be golden as always, I'm sure. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.